Hi, I'm Melissa Fraterrigo. Thank you so much for inviting me into your homes this afternoon. I'm delighted to answer questions that you wrote for your senior seminar with Professor Perkins. Um, you guys gave me some great questions to consider, everything from how and why I opened my own writing studio, the Lafayette Writers Studio, to how I find creative writing, the teaching of creative writing, fulfilling, and how it lends itself to my own creative work, to balancing work life and family. I'm looking forward to addressing your questions, and if anything else comes up as a result of this lecture, feel free to send those questions through Professor Perkins. Um, the first question: what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when starting up your writing studio? Probably the hardest time that the single obstacle that I faced initially was finding a place where I could teach these classes. Um, Anytime you're opening, you're starting a new business, you're starting something for the first time, you want to make sure that you keep your expenses low. The first 2 years that I was teaching classes, actually, maybe it was the first year and a half, I taught everywhere from inside an art gallery, a tea house, and inside a church that allowed me to rent space. Once So because I couldn't find a regular place to teach my classes, it became difficult to get the word out. And I would say that that's the other tricky part about starting any new endeavor, is trying to get a name out there, especially when you're talking about teaching people writing, something that's rather intimate, um, uh, and is going to entail creative expression. That kind of makes people nervous from the get-go. So you want people to trust you. So you have to give yourself time to establish a name and a reputation. So really place, and then and advertising and marketing, which is never any fun. Those were the two biggest challenges when I was starting out. If you are interested in starting a writing studio in your hometown, I would first encourage you to figure out what your motivation is. What is it that you hope to accomplish? Is it that you want to create a sense of community in the town where you grew up? Is it that you notice that anytime you go into a coffee shop, there are people gathering around, talking about books, and maybe they're writing. Maybe you know of a lot of writing groups in your hometown, and yet these groups function in a disparate manner, and you want to kind of be the glue to bring them all together. So figure out your motivation first and foremost, and then I would start small. Just begin with one class. See if you can keep the cost down as low as possible, so that you can get some folks in the door that are really interested in learning from you, and then I would give it your absolute all. I think that even now, I've been teaching for the Lafayette Writers Studio for a little over 3 years now, and I would still say that I probably give my students everything that I can give them, and that extends beyond the time that we have together in a classroom. Someone asked how I've grown as a writer and an educator since beginning the studio, and I think that that's a really interesting question. I think anytime you do something that causes you to challenge yourself, anything new, if you head out into any uncharted waters, so to speak, you don't have any kind of a guidebook, and you have nothing to rely on but your own determination and will and experience. And so one way that I've grown both as an educator and a writer is that the studio has forced me to get to know myself better. I spent some time interviewing owners of other writers studios across the country before I established the Lafayette Writers Studio. And I remember I spoke to a woman in Chicago, and we had maybe a 30-minute conversation, and I asked her, how do you juggle your own writing with your writing studio? And she said, oh, I don't. She said, I don't, this is my full-time job. And I remember that conversation was very unsettling to me because something I've been adamant about from the get-go is that I'm not willing to give up my writing for the writing studio, and so some way that, again, I've been that I've benefited from the studio is that it's forced me to really think hard about the work that I want to devote myself to. It's forced me to get to know myself better. I know that I work best very early in the morning. I wake up, and this also kind of goes into another question someone asked, how I balance everyday life with both being a writer and a teacher, and I'm a freelance writer as well as a mom, and how I balance all those things. And one of the main things I do is I wake up very early before the rest of my family, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now. And the novel that I'm currently working on, in fact, I wrote the whole thing in the early morning hours, and I write longhanded. So the first part of my revision process is to type out that long-handed work. And once I had a draft of this novel with several, 4 yellow legal pads, I started typing the work. Again, that's the first step of my revision process. And it was like somebody was telling me a story. I wasn't even familiar with what was written down on paper. So I've discovered that by waking up early, I'm kind of working in a very dreamlike state, and that allows me to really immerse myself in the fictional world, and it also allows me freedom from the other responsibilities of my day, my responsibilities as a freelance writer, my responsibilities as a teacher and as a mother, and that's made a huge difference, and that's really that's altered the way that I write, and it's altered also the way that I feel about my work. Somebody asked what I find most fulfilling about my life. Is it being a wife, a mother, a writer, or is it all 3 things? And I would definitely say that there's a richness to my life that I experience because I'm constantly switching gears and juggling between these various roles and responsibilities. And on the doubting days, I might think maybe it would be great if I just focused on one activity. Maybe if I was just a freelance writer, or maybe if I just decided to pour myself into my writing, maybe something else would, maybe I'd be a greater success. But ultimately, it comes down to how you feel at the end of the day. And I know that I feel really good about the various responsibilities and experiences that I have throughout the course of a day. That being said, balance is hard when you're doing so many different activities. It's hard to find a balance between what's going to pay the bills and also what feeds your creative work. And ultimately, that's where it comes back to knowing yourself. Somebody asked if I had any advice about publication, about that I wish that somebody had maybe shared with me. And this is just maybe in general about writing. I guess the greatest piece of advice that I would offer to each of you, it is to spend some time getting to know yourself. Figure out what type of environment will allow you to be your best self creatively. If that means that working with a lot of people and having a lot of stimulation day to day is something that allows you to thrive, then try and find a job that's going to allow you to function in that capacity. If you know that you're best at night, that's when you're most awake, then try and find an occupation that's going to fill your days, but give you a little bit of energy still so that you'll be able to do your writing at night. The trick is to always figure out um, who you are and how you are best going to be able to maintain writing and keep it a part of your life. Our culture doesn't necessarily encourage the creative arts, so you have to find a way to surround yourself with both an environment and with people who are going to support you no matter what your writing may bring. Um, Thank you so much for these questions. And I wish you all the very best of luck. If I can answer any questions further or if you need additional clarification, please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.